According to Buddhist wisdom, the path to success is not easy. Buddhist philosophy emphasizes the importance of correctly understanding the teachings received, avoiding misconceptions that can lead to harmful actions and suffering. To experience a full and satisfying life, a deeper understanding, personal reflection, and conscious application of Buddhist wisdom in daily life are required. After these words, the wise Buddha concluded his teaching and left. Friend, pay close attention to this story, as it will be useful to you throughout your life. In a city lived a successful merchant who had achieved everything in his life. He was a man of exceptional wisdom. He had never experienced defeat in any area of his life, and his business also prospered remarkably. Wherever he ventured, he always succeeded. What was his secret? His father had taught him 4 principles that he faithfully followed, and thanks to which he enjoyed a fulfilling life. He was a successful man in every aspect of his existence. Time passed, and now that successful merchant was an old man. He began to feel that his time in this world was coming to an end, that the hour of his departure could be near. He also knew that his son was still naive and did not fully understand how the world worked. That's why he called his son and said, "My son, I learned 4 fundamental lessons from my father, your grandfather, and I have applied them throughout my life, which has led me to be a successful and happy man. Thanks to these pieces of advice, I have enjoyed peace of mind and prosperity. I have never suffered from illnesses or economic shortages. You can see that I am the richest man in this city, but I am also content with what I have. I am deeply happy, but I want you to achieve greater accomplishments, to earn more recognition and wealth. I want people to know you and admire you." The wealthy merchant leaned closer to his son and continued, "My son, today I want to share with you 4 worldly teachings that I received from my father and that you must adopt. If you consistently follow them, you will also become a rich and happy man. By following these teachings, there will be no sadness in your home or difficulties in your business." After this, the prosperous merchant began to impart the 4 teachings to his son. First, go to work under the shade and return under the shade. Second, build a leather fence around your home. Third, always sweeten your meals. And fourth, keep your wife always tied up. With these words, the wealthy merchant felt calm and at peace, trusting that, although his son was still innocent, he would surely follow his advice and apply those 4 lessons in his life. Some months passed, and one day, the prosperous merchant passed away. After his father's death, his son wrote down those 4 principles in a document to always remember them and began to apply them in his daily life. The first guideline his father had given him was to go out and come back under the shade, so he built a structure from his house to his business to avoid sun exposure. He possessed great wealth, and no one could oppose him. When people asked him why he did it, he simply replied that it was his father's recommendation. Then, following his father's next advice, he built a leather barrier around his property. This greatly annoyed the neighbors, who even argued with him. Some questioned why he had done it, arguing that the leather emitted an unpleasant smell and caused problems for them, asking him to remove it immediately. However, no one could stand up to him because of his great wealth. The merchant's son was determined to faithfully follow all of his father's advice. His father had also mentioned a 3rd principle, sweeten the meals, so he always asked his wife to prepare sweet dishes and only consumed those. And the last advice his father had given him was to always keep his wife tied up, so every day he tied her with a rope. Several days passed, and gradually, the life of the wealthy merchant's son began to deteriorate because he had misinterpreted his father's advice and followed it literally. His successful business began to decline, and the number of customers decreased because he went to work whenever he wanted and returned home without a fixed schedule. He showed no interest in his father's business, which caused dissatisfaction among his customers, who stopped coming to his shop. One day, the company he had built with so much effort from his father collapsed. The business that his father had built with so much effort, he had ruined in just a few months. He was very worried, besides having erected a leather barrier around his property, which generated an unbearable odor in the area. Therefore, the neighbors left their homes and moved elsewhere. Due to the bad smell of the leather, no one wanted to visit his house, even his friends and family avoided going there. But he still didn't understand why all these misfortunes were happening. He began to experience deep anxiety and constantly consumed sweet foods, which resulted in a significant weight gain. This obesity was the cause of various illnesses that affected his health. Now, the regular visitors in his home were doctors. Due to these circumstances, he also began to lose money on medical issues. Finally, he had followed his father's fourth piece of advice, to keep his wife tied up, which angered her and led her to leave him and return to her family. He tried to reconcile with his wife in various ways, but she refused, and after all, what woman would want to be with a man who keeps her tied up? Gradually, the life of the merchant's son had completely fallen apart. He no longer had a business, money, wife, or the relatives who used to frequent him for his wealth, nor did he enjoy good health anymore. This filled him with worry and sadness. He didn't understand why all this was happening or what the reason was. He was very distressed by all these things and blamed his father in his heart, saying, "Father, you have completely ruined my life. Because of those four principles, I have lost everything. My business, my wealth, my family, my wife, and even my health has failed. Because of you, my life is ruined. If I hadn't followed those four principles, if I hadn't applied them in my life, I would be living happily. What have I gained by following those four principles? As an obedient son, I followed all your words, I believed in them, but I was naive to blindly trust your words." Saying this, he began to cry uncontrollably. One day, it was known that a wise man had arrived in the nearby city who had the reputation of solving any kind of problem. Upon hearing this, he thought that maybe he could find a solution to his situation. With hope, our protagonist went to the wise man, bowed before him, and began to cry with sorrow. "O respected sage, only you can help me now. My father has completely affected my life. I am in a disastrous situation because of his influence. I have faithfully followed his advice, been a good son, fulfilled all my responsibilities, and this is what has resulted from following his advice and being like him. Even on his deathbed, he taught me wrong, and I am suffering the consequences of following his advice and following his example. What did I do wrong with him?" With these words, his crying intensified in front of the sage. The sage then asked the merchant's son to calm down and tell him the whole story. Why was he crying like this? What was the root of his problem? Upon hearing this, the merchant's son handed the sage a document he had written after his father's death, where he had written down the four pieces of advice. The sage read the document and burst into laughter, saying to the merchant's son, "How innocent you are! Your father gave you all the wisdom in the world, but you couldn't understand it. You didn't properly follow his advice and claimed that it led you astray. Your father was testing you to see if you could interpret his words or not, if you could grasp the true meaning of his advice. If he had wanted to, he would have clearly explained the meaning, but he wanted you to discover it for yourself. I have never seen someone as naive as you, who has such wisdom and yet makes such big mistakes. You haven't gained knowledge or wisdom. If you had understood the true meaning of those words, you would have been successful and happy like your father, and your life would have been pleasant. But you misinterpreted your father's advice and did not reflect on its meaning. You simply followed his instructions without understanding them. If you didn't understand the meaning, you could have sought the help of a wise person to clarify it. But what you understood from your father's advice is not its true meaning." Upon hearing this, the merchant's son asked, "So what should I do now? How can I reverse my situation?" The sage revealed the true meaning of the father's advice, showing him how to correctly apply it in his life to regain his well-being and success. With this new perspective, the merchant's son pledged to follow the true path pointed out by his father, hoping to rebuild his life and regain lost prosperity and joy. Before revealing the solution to his problems, I invite you to share in the comments your interpretation of the advice that the father gave to his son. This is your chance to demonstrate whether you truly understand the depth and scope of the teachings that the rich merchant wanted to convey to his descendant. Let's continue. The sage explained that the first advice meant to start work before dawn and conclude after dusk. This instruction emphasized the importance of dedication and effort in work, ensuring that the maximum time possible was devoted to understanding and improving it properly. The goal was for the mind and efforts to be applied in work to advance and succeed. However, the merchant's son misinterpreted this advice, creating an environment that allowed him to always move in the shade instead of understanding the symbolism of working hard and during the most productive hours of the day. My father gave me valuable knowledge, but I treated it as ordinary. Next, the merchant's son asked the sage about the second advice. The sage explained that building a leather fence meant having a dog or a cat at home. These animals would protect the home, ensuring wealth and allowing focus on the work in the shop without worries, better understanding tasks and progressing. Additionally, there would be no fear of a thief stealing belongings. That is the true essence of erecting a leather fence, but you interpreted it differently. You covered your entire house walls with leather, causing a bad odor and causing your neighbors to move away. Even your friends and family avoided visiting you because of the unpleasant smell. The merchant's son then inquired about the third advice. The sage explained that eating sweets meant to eat only when hungry, neither before nor after. Otherwise, one would never appreciate the food, even if it was delicious. That's why your father said you should make your food sweet, so that you truly appreciate the food when you really need it. But you misinterpreted this, constantly eating sweets, which increased your weight and attracted illnesses. From now on, eat only when you are hungry. It will be beneficial for your health. Then, the merchant's son expressed, the fourth advice is clear, always keep your wife tied up. Could there be another way to interpret it? Did I also misunderstand it? The sage replied, yes, son. Keeping your wife tied up does not literally mean physically tying her up every day. It means that when disagreements or disputes arise, you should not get angry with her, but seek a solution together. Trust and mutual understanding are essential in any relationship. When a man and a woman are committed, both feel secure and committed to the relationship. That is what it really means to keep your wife tied up. However, you interpreted this incorrectly, physically tying your wife, which is totally inappropriate and worsened your situation even more. Your father's message was that you should strengthen your bonds with those close to you, so that even after conflicts and disagreements, they do not harm or hinder you. You should do the same for them. Always strengthen your relationships. Do not leave them to chance, otherwise, they will slip away from your hands. Many of us make these mistakes in life by neglecting our new relationships, weakening those bonds, and thus losing them. And this is the same mistake you made. You tied your wife. How could she forgive you? That's why she left you. What you did to your wife is unforgivable, but you must apologize because you did everything wrong. Go and apologize. These were the 4 pieces of advice your father wanted to convey to you, but you misinterpreted them, and that's why you ruined everything. Although there is still time, if you correctly follow these pieces of advice, you can regain what was lost. These pieces of advice are the key to solving life's problems. If you seek success, you must strive. Leave home early and return late to protect your heritage. Strengthen your relationships to avoid problems and damages, and enjoy a good and healthy meal only when you are hungry, to live each day happily. Keep your bonds strong and do not neglect them, otherwise, they will slip away from your hands. Make sure you have a dog or cat at home to always protect your heritage. By following these pieces of advice in your life, you can regain what was lost and perhaps even progress further, making your life happier and more satisfying. With these words, the sage calmed his mind. The merchant's son admitted his mistakes, thanked the sage, and returned home. He applied these 4 pieces of advice in his life and followed them diligently. Since then, he began to notice improvements in his life, revitalized his business, reconciled with his wife, and gradually found greater happiness and satisfaction in his day-to-day life. So friend, I hope you enjoyed today's story. I invite you to share your reflections and learnings in the comments section. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. See you.